Over the holidays, I got my hands on one of the latest 10.5-inch iPad Pros. I've been drawing on the 12.9 for quite a while now, so I figured I would share my thoughts on which size might be better for you. The first thing I want to do is a little bit of a disclaimer. The 10.5-inch iPad Pro that I'm going to be using is a 2017 model. However, the 12.9-inch version I am using is the 2015 model. So there are some generational differences, and I'm going to be going over those generational differences before I dive into the size comparison. Okay, so what are the differences? I think there are really two that need to be mentioned. The newer iPads have a refresh rate of 120 Hz versus the previous 60 Hz. That's twice as fast of a refresh rate. And the 10.5 is also using true tone colors. What is that? Well, basically that means that Apple is adjusting the color balance of the display based on the light conditions that you're in. This makes it easier for you to read. So the big question here is, do I notice the refresh rate between the older iPad and the newer iPad? Well, the short answer, Apple fanboys are gonna kill me, is no. When I first started using the new iPad and I was scrolling through text or drawing a line, I really didn't notice any difference compared to what I was used to drawing on my older iPad. When I really did start to notice is when I started to break down, focus on it. For example, if I am scrolling through text and trying to focus on text and read it while I am scrolling, that's when I noticed the refresh rate difference. Also, when I started drawing and intentionally tried to find that gap between the line that I was drawing, then I also noticed the refresh rate difference. This was a hard thing to capture on film. I ended up slowing down the footage. You can see it here. On the larger, older iPad, you can tell the line is lagging behind that pencil, probably because of the refresh rate, might have something to do with the processor. And here is the footage on the newer iPad. You can see the lag is far less on this pencil line when I slow the footage way down. I think my major takeaway here is it's really nice to have. But if you still have an older iPad, I wouldn't say this is worth upgrading for. Now that the generational differences are out of the way, let's talk about the size differences between these two things. If you're looking at the 12.9 or the 10.5, the 2017 editions, you're not going to see a huge difference between them, but there are a couple core ones that you want to pay attention to. The main thing, obviously, is the screen size, but also the resolution of that screen size. The 10.5 is 2,224 by 1,668 pixels. That gives you 264 pixels per inch. The 12.9 iPad Pro has 2,732 pixels by 2,048 pixels, but it's also at 264 pixels per inch, just like the smaller iPad. That means looking at these things side by side, the screens look very similar and they both look really, really crisp. The other thing to point out about these screens, it separates them from, say, older Wacom Cintiqs or some of the Cintiq alternatives I usually review on this channel, is the screen thickness. The glass is really, really thin. This is really nice because when you're drawing with the Apple Pencil on the screen, you don't see any displacement between where the pencil lands and where the cursor appears. Usually, with most programs, there isn't actually a cursor, but where the line appears underneath the pencil, it lines up very, very well. It's extremely well calibrated. The other thing you're going to notice is that my larger iPad has a matte screen protector on it. That's just a preference. That's something I put on it. I like the feel of drawing on those matte screens. It diffuses the colors on it. It makes the screen not quite as crisp, but it just feels better to draw on. So it's a trade-off, and these matte screen protectors are fairly inexpensive. I did a video review on these things a while back. I'll link to that down below in case you're interested. As far as the Apple Pencil drawing responsiveness, how it controls, it feels identical between these two iPads. The pressure curve, the response rate, everything you look for in a good stylus is right there. It's really nice. Some of the Wacom products let you jump in, adjust the pressure curve. You can't do that by default on the Apple Pencil. Some apps actually will allow you to do that, others won't, so it's decided on an app-by-app basis. It's not decided on a system basis. So I give all this background because I think the differentiating factor between which one you get, the 10.5 or the 12.9, is really going to come down to the size of screen that you want. So which size is better is really going to depend on how you plan on using it. If you're purchasing an iPad Pro because you want to draw on it and only draw on it, then I think the bigger one is definitely the better one. And the downside of that 12.9-inch iPad Pro is that it's just not as comfortable to hold in your hands. Say you're reading with it, you're watching video on it. It's heavier, it's bulkier, it's about 50% heavier actually. So just casually carrying around and using it, it's a little bulky and it's not quite as good for those kind of activities. Although I will say this, the screen size is about the same size as a standard paper comic book, so if you're really really into reading comics, comics look phenomenal on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Now, if you're buying an iPad because you want an iPad to use just for everyday use, but you also want to draw on it, I think then it might be worth looking into the 10.5 version, the smaller one. It's just a lot easier to carry around, tilt, read on for long extended periods of time, play games on, that sort of thing. The smaller size really matters there. Another thing that you're going to want to factor in is which apps you plan on using. When I use AstroPad, which mirrors my Mac's display, I notice that I do have less space. So if I'm using Photoshop or Illustrator or any of those desktop apps that way, I am going to have less room for a lot of the extra tools and stuff that those apps pack onto the screen. Same thing with Clip Studio that recently came out for the iPad. You're going to notice that that is going to be smaller as well. Mostly because it's just replicating the desktop app, so it's taking everything and shrinking it into a smaller space. Now, these aren't huge deal breakers, but they are things worth pointing out. If you're using apps specifically designed for the iPad, that's a different story. Using something like Procreate, I really didn't notice the lack of screen size at all. Mostly because these kind of apps don't have a lot of interface cruft anyway. They tend to get out of your way. So the screen size just wasn't a big deal. So in review, those are the two biggest things that you should be looking into. One, what apps are you going to be using? And two, how much are you going to be using it for drawing and how much are you going to be using it for other things? I hope that helps. I really like drawing on this thing, and it's kind of cool to have a second one. The only reason I haven't drawn as much on my iPad in the last year is I probably have drawn on some of the other things that I own is because my daughter loves drawing on it too. The iPad Pro is the only thing she'll draw on, so in the evenings when I have time to draw is also when she's using it. I'll brag on her a little bit. Here's some of her artwork. She's getting really good. I think in 2 or 3 years she'll be way better than me and she'll probably be the one running this channel. So if you have any comments or questions, let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'd like to thank the folks over on Patreon for supporting me. That's all I've got. I'll see you guys in a couple of days.